Thank you for that great introduction. Hello, my name is Charlene Peterson. I work as a labeling reviewer in the Division of Labeling Review, Office of Generic Drugs. Today, Lieutenant Commander Daniel Russell and Dr. Marshall Florence and I will be presenting on common labeling issues and general tips for Abbreviated New Drug Applications, otherwise known as ANDAs. The objectives for our presentation are to address common issues regarding the ANDA labeling, along with discussing topics to ensure high-quality labeling submissions, which will potentially reduce review cycles. Also, this discussion will increase the knowledge on ANDA labeling-related topics and assist applicants with providing high-quality labeling submissions and potentially reduce review cycles. The overview that we will provide is as follows. First of all, will be general information on ANDA labeling. This will include submission requirements and common issues to avoid, along with information on medication guide requirements. Lieutenant Commander Daniel Russell will speak about the USP monograph and also different package type terms. Then we will have Dr. Marshall Florence, who will speak about the impact of patents and exclusivities, over-the-counter drug products, and different types of supplements. Labeling updates for non-marketing ANDAs. First of all, we'd like to remind you that labeling updates are required when the reference listed drug, otherwise known as the RLD, revises their labeling. Even if an ANDA is not marketing, the applicant must submit updated labeling to be the same as the most recently approved reference listed drug label per CFR 201.56A2. In the event the RLD label is withdrawn, we refer you to FDA guidance updating ANDA labeling after the marketing application for the reference listed drug has been withdrawn. Information found within this guidance states ANDAs that are pending or generic drugs that continue to be marketed under one or more ANDAs that rely on the withdrawn RLD, the labeling of those pending or marketed ANDA products may need to be updated to reflect changes that would have been necessary had the new drug application, otherwise known as the NDA, for the RLD not been withdrawn. We also would like to bring to your attention that RLD labeling that is withdrawn or is not posted at Drugs at FDA, we recommend that you reach out to Drugs at FDA and request posting if the link does not appear. Also, we refer you to draft guidance for industry referencing approved drug products and abbreviated new drug applications, otherwise known as ANDA, submission. Format for labeling submissions. The prescribing information should be in both PDF, text, and Word documents. Ensure that the documents submitted are the same as the latest RLD labeling found at Drugs at FDA. Please ensure that your documents are consistent between both the PDF text documents and the Word documents. Sometimes there are inconsistencies between the documents. Here we have an example of a PDF text document and a Word document. On the left side, we have 13.1 listed as carcinogenesis, mutagenesis, impairment of fertility. When we look to the right side, we see under the Word document 14, carcinogenesis, mutagenesis, impairment of fertility. As we go further down on the PDF text document, we see 14 clinical studies. On the right side, under the Word document, we see 15 clinical studies. If there are inconsistencies, they are noted as deficiencies depending upon the severity. We recommend you thoroughly check all documents because some errors may result in further review cycles. It's important to note and recognize that this is a simple error, but more complex errors occur between documents, including the final printed labeling, which is the FPL. Sometimes simple errors can be rectified by other means, such as an IR, otherwise known as an information request. Handling errors in new drug application labeling. In general, ANDA should follow the NDA RLD even if the NDA is wrong. If the error is for information that has safety concern, please raise this issue to the regulatory project manager. If it pertains to your ANDA or druginfo@fda.hhs.gov, if it pertains to a general question. Here we have an example of an NDA label error example. The NDA has submitted the information as follows. 6.1 says clinical studies experience. However, the ANDA labeling says 6.1 clinical trials experience. Also, in this particular example, the NDA lists contents section 1.2 as opioid-induced constipation. However, the ANDA lists this information as 1.2 opioid-induced constipation in adult patients with chronic non-cancer pain. Therefore, it is important that even if the NDA's information is not accurate, that the ANDA follow exactly what the NDA says. And as related on the previous slide, any concerns, we recommend that you contact the project manager. Manufacturing statement and format. Please include one of the qualifying statements found in 21 CFR 201.1 H5 or 6 on the drug product labels and labeling. Also include a statement of the place of business per 21 CFR 201.1I. Please make sure this information is consistent across all labeling pieces where it is listed or required. An example is manufactured for, and it says Drugs Incorporated, and the address is Silver Spring, Maryland. Also note that you can also have a statement that says distributed by, manufactured by for, or manufactured for and by. Those are other typical examples that can be used as a manufacturing statement and will be acceptable. Q1, Q2 parental products. Q1, Q2 parental ANDA labeling should be the same as the RLD and include all of the sections. For example, if a product has a compatibility with other drugs or other products, it is important that this particular section, if it's in the reference listed drug labeling, it should be included in the ANDA labeling. ANDAs should be the same as the RLD with Q1, Q2 products because the active and inactive ingredients are the same, with the exception of preservatives, buffer substances to adjust tonicity, or thickening agents. We refer you to 21 CFR 314.94A 9.4. Appropriate medication guide statements. On this slide, we have examples of appropriate medication guide statements. They are as follows. Dispense enclosed medication guide to each patient, or dispense the accompanying medication guide to each patient, or dispense the medication guide provided separately to each patient. An appropriate medication guide statement should be in a prominent and conspicuous manner as required per 21 CFR 208.24D. Medication guide availability online. Please note, a medication guide can be submitted electronically. It is acceptable for a generic applicant to offer the medication guide electronically by including a URL in their labeling, even if the RLD does not take this approach. Also note that this change may be submitted and the changes be affected 0, CVE 0 supplement. Location and examples of statements. We recommend adding a statement to the end of the package insert and to the top of the medication guide. This will alert dispensers that a medication guide will need to be printed. Based on current technology, the website should display a PDF version of the medication guide. The link should be simple and non-promotional. We have provided some suggested language. Dispense with medication guide available at www.companyname/medguide/drugname.pdf. We also recommend adding a statement to the packaging, which would be the immediate container label and the carton labeling. This would be subject to spacing limitations, which identifies the link to the electronic medication guide. For example, print medication guide at www.companyname/medguide/drugname.pdf. This concludes my portion of the presentation. At this time, I would like to turn the next section over to Lieutenant Commander Danielle Russell, who will be discussing information on the USP monographs and different packaging type terms.
Thank you, Dr. Peterson. Hello, everyone. My name is Lieutenant Commander Danielle Russell. I am a labeling assessor for the Office of Generic Drugs, Division of Labeling Review. Today, I will be presenting on USP monographs and package type terms. USP monographs. USP monographs contain tests, procedures, and acceptance criteria to ensure the identity, strength, quality, and purity of a drug product. A monograph also contains specifications and other requirements related to packaging, storage, and labeling. USP monographs provide reference standards to confirm accuracy and reproducibility, reduce the risk of ANDA rejection, accelerate product development, and standardize any additional labeling requirements for a drug product. Because of that, it is important for applicants to comply with the standards set forth in the USP monograph. Often monographs will have additional requirements that applicants should adhere to when submitting their ANDA applications. Here is an example of a monograph pulled directly from USP. As you can see at the bottom of the slide, the monograph explicitly states the requirements that should be included on the product labeling. Specifically, it states, label the tablets for oral suspension to indicate that they are intended for dispersion in a liquid before oral administration of the prescribed dose. Regardless of whether an applicant decides to utilize the USP descriptor on their drug product label and labeling, they must comply with the requirements set forth by USP. To reiterate the last point, here's an example of a generic drug label. As shown in the yellow circle, the label indicates that the tablets for oral suspension are intended for dispersion in a liquid prior to oral administration. If a drug product has a USP monograph with specific requirements, it is important to comply to avoid deficiency comments. Here are some general tips that will help with an applicant's submission of a drug product subject to a USP monograph. The name of the drug product in the submission should read exactly as the title of the USP monograph. Oftentimes there are updates to the USP, which I will speak of further with the next slide, so it is important to frequently check for updates on the USP website. When submitting an application for a drug product subject to a USP monograph, our recommendation is to limit the use of the USP descriptor to only the quality sections of the PI as listed on this slide. When checking USP, be sure not to only look for currently official monographs, but also not yet official monographs, which are in yellow like the example here. Per the USP General Notices Section 3.10, early adoption of revised standards in advance of the official date is allowed by USP unless specified otherwise at the time of publication. Applicants may adopt not yet official standards up to 6 months before the to be official date listed. To further reiterate the importance of frequently and routinely checking USP, here's an example of a product subject to a USP monograph that updates quite frequently. So being diligent in monitoring for updates is important in order for an applicant's labeling to be in compliance with the most up-to-date monograph. Another component of the USP monograph that affects labeling is the inclusion of dissolution statements. Here are some of the various scenarios possible in how it would affect the labeling of the description section of an applicant's labeling. Please note the dissolution statement should always be placed at the end of the description section of labeling. The major takeaway here is that if an applicant's drug product is subject to a USP monograph, the drug product should comply with the dissolution test listed in the monograph. If there is more than one dissolution test in the monograph, the description section should indicate which test was used and or follow any dissolution test statement instructions listed in the monograph. If the applicant chooses to submit a dissolution test that differs from the one listed in the monograph, the description section of the prescribing information should state, FDA approved dissolution test specifications differ from USP. This is a screenshot of a monograph. The red circle displays where the dissolution test can be found in the monograph. The image on the right shows an example of an ANDA with only one dissolution test. The applicant should comply with this test. As indicated in the previous slide, if the test used does not meet the USP dissolution test, then the statement FDA approved dissolution test specifications differ from USP should be included in the description section of labeling. This is an example of how the dissolution section of the USP monograph will appear if there is more than one dissolution test, with each test labeled. The applicant should indicate which dissolution test was used in the labeling. Again, if the test is pending or does not meet any of the listed USP dissolution tests, then a statement should be included indicating such. These are a couple of examples of how dissolution statements appear in labeling. And just as a reminder, resolve any dissolution statement issues that may affect labeling quickly to avoid changes to the labeling that would necessitate multiple reviews by DLR. After ANDA approval, It is still important to remain diligent with routinely checking the USP website so the ANDA labeling can remain compliant, or in case a USP monograph becomes effective after ANDA approval. An applicant may submit changes to comply with the USP monograph or a newly effective monograph in the annual report. Now I will discuss package type terms of injectable drug products. The guidance listed was created to provide recommendations of the appropriate package type terms and provide revised definitions of the various package type terms. The utilization of the recommendations set forth in the guidance is intended to provide consistent use of the correct package type terms and therefore promote the proper use of injectable products. From a labeling perspective, it is important to note that there may be a situation in which the RLD package type term may differ from the term recommended in the guidance. If this situation occurs, it is our recommendation that the ANDA applicant follow the guidance. The applicant should choose the appropriate package type term for their drug product, and there should be consistency amongst the various labeling components. On this slide is a flowchart that is included in the guidance that illustrates how the appropriate package type term for an injectable product can be determined. This visual tool can be used to aid in package type term selection of single dose container, single patient use container, or multiple dose container. And lastly, I want to share an example. On this slide, we see that if a label is submitted with a retired package type term, single use, we will recommend that it be revised to single dose so it follows the new term set forth in the FDA guidance. This concludes my portion of the presentation. So now Dr. Marshall Florence will present on patent and exclusivities, OTC products, and supplements. Thank you.
Thank you, Danielle, for that great job and wonderful introduction. My name is Marshall Florence, and I'm a team leader in the Division of Labeling Review, and I'm going to talk to you today about a few more important topics. The first topic I'm going to discuss with you will be patents and exclusivities and how they relate to ANDA submissions. First things first, as stated, before each submission, along with drugs at FDA and the USP, the Orange Book should also be checked for any new or expired information and potential labeling updates. It is very important to ensure that all patents and exclusivities are addressed. Additionally, it is even more important that the labeling being submitted matches the patent certifications and exclusivity statements. If there is a discrepancy between a patent certification or exclusivity statement and the submitted labeling, a deficiency will be issued to rectify the problem. As I just stated, in making sure all patents are addressed, any method of use claim associated with the patent or patents also needs to be addressed in the certification statement. This is especially important when method of use codes are shared amongst different patents or shared between other method of use codes. This information also needs to be clearly and accurately represented in the labeling, and any discrepancy here will also cause a deficiency to be issued and result in further review cycles. On the next slide, I will explain this in a little more detail. Here, we have a fictitious drug, meal drug tablets, which is a blockbuster drug taking the world by storm. The NDA sponsor has submitted over time supplements and label updates, and with those updates, new patents and method of use codes have been listed in the Orange Book and are shown in this table format. As I stated on the prior slides, Each patent should be addressed separately, along with its associated method of use code. In this example, you will see that I color-coded the method of use codes. When there are multiple patents and use codes, please review the use codes and ensure that the certification for each patent and use code are congruent, especially if there is overlap between method of use codes. For example, if you do a carve-out or Section 8 certification to use code U777, then you cannot claim a P4 certification to use code U456 due to the overlap. If claims do not align and labeling does not match the claims, then the discrepancy will be dealt with as a deficiency. Now, let's take a look at over-the-counter products. As previously stated, and a main message today, ensure that the labeling submitted for an over-the-counter ANDA is up to date with the most recently approved reference-listed drug label found at Drugs at FDA. Also, ensure that the labeling format is in accordance with regulations found in 21 CFR 201.66. Specifically, please ensure that the font size and letter height within the drug facts label on over-the-counter products is in accordance with 21 CFR 201.66 D2. To help facilitate reviewing, please also include a legend for all font types, sizes, and colors for the labeling. As discussed earlier, USP monographs are important, not only for legend prescription products, but also over-the-counter products. Specifically, for dealing with dissolution statements, please ensure that the proper dissolution test number is included at the end of the Other Information section if Test 1 was not used. If the USP dissolution test is pending petition to the USP or does not meet any of the listed USP dissolution tests for the monograph of the product, then please include the appropriate statement. FDA-approved dissolution test specifications differ from USP at the end of the Other Information section. Remember that if the monograph is approved, any USP monograph issues must be resolved prior to the approval of the ANDA product. For inactive ingredients, there are two important things to remember, depending on the inactive ingredients utilized. Please ensure that the inactive ingredients listed on the label not only match what was submitted in the quality modules, but that they are also listed in alphabetical order. If an inactive ingredient is utilized in formulation that requires additional labeling statements, please follow regulations for that specific inactive ingredient in addition to the general requirements for over-the-counter labeling. The last few important points for over-the-counter products. Please ensure that a toll-free contact number of a source to answer questions or concerns about the product is listed on the label. It is also recommended that the days of the week and times of contact are listed, even if it is 24 hours a day. That a person is available to respond to consumer inquiries is listed with the contact number. As previously mentioned, please ensure the font size is no less than size 6 point per CFR 201.66 D2. In addition to the contact phone number, please also ensure that the FDA toll-free number appears in the warning section of the label, which is 1-800-FDA-1088. Finally, if citing the Poison Prevention Center organization on the label, please be sure to include their contact number in case of emergency for the consumer. The last topic I'm going to discuss will be supplements and types of changes for supplements. The categories for supplements can be found in 21 CFR 314.70, and also the guidance listed here entitled changes to an approved NDA or ANDA. There are several different reporting categories, and each category has its own classification into one of the 3 supplement types. The types of reporting categories are listed below and include manufacturing sites, manufacturing process, specifications, container closure systems, labeling, and miscellaneous changes. Each of the reporting categories and their change can be classified as a major change, moderate change, or minor change. A major change is known as a prior approval supplement, while a moderate change is known as a changes being affected supplement, and a minor change is known as an annual report. It is important to know that some of these issues, like container closure system, can impact labeling. So if anything does change, please ensure to update the label as needed with those changes. Prior approval supplements. These are major changes to an approved application and are changes that require the supplement submission and approval of the submission prior to the distribution of the product made using that change. From the reporting categories mentioned before, an example of a prior approval supplement for a manufacturing site would be one that encompasses a move to a different manufacturing site when the new site has not been inspected by the FDA or includes the restarting of a 2-year or greater discontinued site. An example of some labeling changes would be the addition and use of a proprietary name. Also, changes that are different from the reference listed drugs labeling, such as additional language or deletion of certain language for manufacturing differences, including instructions for use, would be classified as a prior approval supplement. Finally, any change to a medication guide also qualifies as a prior approval supplement. The next type of supplement is known as changes being affected. These are moderate changes to an approved application and are known as changes being affected 30 and changes being affected 0. The difference between the two are the time of submission and marketing the changes in the product. Moderate changes requiring supplement submission at least 30 days prior to the distribution of the drug product made using the change are known as changes being affected 30, while less moderate changes that allow for distribution at the time of supplement submission are known as changes being affected 0. From the reporting categories mentioned, an example of a changes being affected 30 for a container closure system would be changes in the size or shape of the container for sterile drug substance, or the change, addition, or the deletion of a desiccant. An example of some labeling changes would be the reintroduction of the product into commercial market. Other labeling examples would be new packaging configurations, including blisters or unit dose cups, or changes in the layout of packaging. From the reporting categories mentioned, an example of changes being affected 0 for a miscellaneous change would be the listing of a new distributor or distributor information. An example of some labeling changes would be updating labeling to provide medication guides in electronic format, or revising the prescribing information to be in accordance with the most recently approved and updated reference-listed drug labeling. Also, if a patent or exclusivity has expired and information needs to be added back to the labeling from a carve-out, this would be allowed as a changes being affected 0 supplement. The last type of supplement is known as an annual report. These are editorial or similar minor changes to an approved application and are known as annual reports. From the reporting categories mentioned, an example of a specification change would be a change in specification made to comply with an official compendium. An example of some labeling changes would be to also comply with an official compendium, such as adding the USP designation to labeling and labeling pieces, or any type of editorial changes such as typos or formatting fixes, or editorial changes to the description of the drug product, imprint codes, or the how supplied section. In summary, over the course of this presentation, we reviewed common issues regarding ANDA labeling and offered helpful tips to ensure high-quality labeling submissions, which could potentially reduce review cycles. We also provided general tips and recommendations into ways to improve all types of labeling submissions and avoid some common errors. Here are resources we used and resources for further guidance into the topics discussed today.
Thank you to all of our speakers for the great presentations, and we welcome you back to our Q&A panel discussion. Joining us as a panelist is Commander Esther Chu, who's a team leader in the Division of Labeling Review in OGD's Office of Regulatory Operations. In this role, Commander Chu leads a team of pharmacists responsible for reviewing the labeling submissions and the Abbreviated New Drug Applications. Also, we welcome Dr. Yoon-Suk Kim, who's a labeling reviewer in the Division of Labeling Review in OGD's Office of Regulatory Operations. In this role, Dr. Kim is responsible for reviewing the labeling submissions and ANDAs. If you haven't had a chance to enter your questions into the Q&A chat pod, please do so now. We'll answer as many questions as time allows. We see some questions coming in right now, and the first group of questions will be directed to Dr. Peterson. And here's the first question. What is the relationship of the NDA with the ANDA?
Hi, thank you for the question. This is Dr. Peterson. First of all, an NDA is a new drug application, and an ANDA is an abbreviated new drug application. The relationship would be that the ANDA, which is the abbreviated drug application, would need to make sure that they model their labeling to be the same as the new drug application. As stated on one of the slides, we want to refer you to CFR, to 505J 2A 5 of the Act and 21 CFR 314.94A8. So just a reminder that your ANDA should model after the new drug application. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. The next question is also directed to Dr. Peterson, and here's the question. If the RLD is discontinued and only the package insert /medguide is available on drugs at FDA, and the container carton labeling is not available, can the applicant compare its drug product carton and container labeling to the current reference standard container and carton labeling from Daily Med?
Hi, thank you so much for that question. First of all, as referenced in the review, the standard is from drugs at FDA. So therefore, we do not recommend that you use Daily Med as your reference. So when there's a case of a withdrawn product, we recommend you to look at the FDA guidance for updating ANDA labeling after the marketing application for the reference listed drug has been withdrawn. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. We have a few more questions for Dr. Peterson, and here's the next question. Should labeling be also updated for the ANDA that is discontinued but not withdrawn?
Hi, thank you for that question. Yes, even if you are not marketing the ANDA must submit updated labeling to be the same as the most recently approved reference listed drug. Therefore, it's important that you continue to follow what the RLD has done and any updates, and make sure that you apply that to your generic product. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. Looks like we have one more question in this round for Dr. Peterson, and here's the question. In what format should I submit the prescribing information?
Thank you for that question. It's important that the format for labeling be submitted in both the PDF text document and also a Word document. Those are the two formats that we would like our submissions to be submitted in. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. And the next group of questions will be directed to Dr. Florence. And here's the first question. In section 8.1, pregnancy, as per PLLR, pregnancy category is no longer mentioned. Some RLDs in PLLR still contain pregnancy category B or C. Should we need to keep in line with the RLD or follow the PLLR guidance?
Thanks, Ray. For that question, if the RLD is in PLR format, please wait for the RLD to update their label and continue to be the same as the RLD. If the RLD is in non-PLR format, you may go ahead and remove the pregnancy category.
Thank you for responding to that question. The next question for Dr. Florence. Does the carton and container label need to match the RLD exactly? What if there are safer ways to present the information on the label?
Thank you again, Ray. Yes, the carton and container labels, they need to be the same as the RLD, and they cannot be any less or more safe than the RLD. Therefore, please ensure to follow the RLD labels for all labeling pieces to be the same as.
Thank you for responding to that question. The next question for Dr. Florence. If an A&D application is approved, but the product is not marketed at the moment and this ANDA is acquired by the new owner, does the manufacturing section need to be updated with the information of the new owner, or does it have to be left blank, or just keep the previous owner's information as it is not commercially marketed at that moment?
For this one, Ray, if an ANDA is not being marketed and is acquired by a new company, the manufacturing information section may retain the old information from the previous company or may be updated to be left blank. Once it is reintroduced into market, they will need the new information for that section.
Thank you for responding to that question. We've got a couple more questions for Dr. Florence, and here's the next one. What is the way forward for the labeling updates of the RLD after submissions of the A&D labeling, specifically if they pertain to the requirement of supporting data, for example, inclusion of additional indication or extension to earlier excluded populations or age groups, etc.?
Thanks again, Ray. If there is an RLD supplement approval and it does contain labeling with that supplement approval and is posted at Drugs at FDA, the ANDA will need to update and they may submit that updated labeling as an amendment to their ANDA.
Thank you for responding to that question. We have another question for Dr. Florence. If the approved RLD label is not meeting requirements in 21 CFR 201.66 WRT font size smaller than 6 points for the drug facts table, is the ANDA allowed to use the same smaller font size on their labeling?
For this one, as mentioned earlier, please ensure your ANDA label follows the regulations for font size, and any issues with the RLD label may be reported to OND.
Thank you for responding to that question. The next round of questions will be directed to Commander Chu. And here's the first question. If RLD labeling does not fully list the abbreviations when they are first used in the package insert, does the generic product package insert include fully listed abbreviations the first time they appear in the package insert? For example, AUC equals area under the curve.
So thank you for the question. Our general recommendation is that you follow the RLD labeling, and we will evaluate at the time of our review to provide further comment if necessary.
Thank you for responding to that question. Next question for Commander Chu. Please let us know the difference of manufactured for and or distributed by statement. Would you be able to provide an example of when you would one would be required to place both manufactured for and distributed by statement versus the manufactured for statement?
So manufactured for and distributed by statements, they're both qualifying statement for a distributor. So there would not be a time where you will need to use both. So you can use either manufactured for or distributed by statement on your labeling or label. Per 21 CFR 21.1, you're only required to include one of the three qualifying statements, either the manufacturer, the distributor, or the packager. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. We have another question for Commander Chu, and here's the question. Where the RLD is discontinued for other than a safety reason, the RLD labeling is not available on drugs at FDA. Is it acceptable to use the RLD labeling available on the Daily Med for a side-by-side comparison and for any other purpose?
So I would say yes, and I'm going to refer you to some guidances. The first guidance is the FDA draft guidance for industry referencing approved drug products in abbreviated new drug application submissions. Per this guidance, this requires the applicant to check the appropriate source for obtaining RLD labeling. However, there are instances where the RLD labeling cannot be located. In that situation, you may, for your convenience, initially compare your proposed generic product labeling with the labeling of another ANDA that references the same RLD, and your source may be the Daily Med. And then the same RLD, let me see, sorry. Okay, and then prior to approval, once you submit the labeling prior to approval, you may need to revise the labeling to reflect certain updated information that would have been necessary had the RLD not been withdrawn. There's another guidance I would like to refer you to, and this is the FDA's draft guidance for industry on updating ANDA labeling after the marketing application for the reference listed drug has been withdrawn. I hope I answered this question. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. We have one more question for Commander Chu, and here's the question. What is the minimum font requirement for IFUs that appear on the outer carton for a pre-filled syringe combination product?
I want to refer you to a guidance titled Container Carton Labeling for the safety consideration for container and carton labeling guidance. And from this guidance, it recommends that the sponsor choose the typeface and the font size that is easy to read. We recommend that the font is at least 4 points, but and the guidance also recommends that it is 12-point font whenever the size, the space allows. But overall, we would like for you to choose the font size that will be easy to read. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. The next group of questions will be directed to Dr. Kim, and here's the first question. We understand that USP compliance is mandatory, but the inclusion of USP in the product name is recommended but not mandatory. In such a case, if an applicant chooses not to use the USP descriptor, can we then also exclude the USP recommended statements for labeling? Please clarify. Why do reviewers insist for inclusion of USP and USP recommended labeling statements in the labeling?
Thank you for the question, Ray. So the first question, whether or not when you exclude a USP descriptor in the name, whether or not they can also exclude a USP recommended statement. The answer is no.
Thank you for responding to that question. We have another question for Dr. Kim, and here's the question. Would it be an allowable labeling difference if an ANDA product complies with a different dissolution test within a USP monograph rather than the RLD?
Thanks for the question. The answer is yes. So for example, the RLD use the dissolution test 1, and you use the different test, for example, test number 2, then you clearly indicate that you use the test number 2 in the labeling, and that is permissible difference. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. It looks like we have time for just about one more question. And this question will be directed to Dr. Florence, and here is the question. Is a label on the ophthalmic vial or ampule considered the primary packaging or the secondary packaging?
Thanks, Ray, for the last question. The ampule or vial would be considered as the container label, the primary label, and any information that appears on the RLD's packaging configuration would also need to appear on the ANDA label as well.
Well, that's all the time we have for questions. We want to thank all of our presenters and